This is part of our Conversations from Main Street series, and this is a series that we have offered free of charge thanks to the very, very generous support of the Angela and Scott Jagger Foundation, so we thank them heartily for that. In fact, we have a few other Conversations from Main Street coming up this season. Next month, we have author Jamie Ford, who his first book was Hotel in the Corner of Bitter and Sweet, and he's coming out with his second book this week, and it's his only New York stop, so I hope you'll come back for that. And in November, we have a program called Music and Memory. It is Dan Brown. We're going to be doing a film screening and then followed by a discussion, and this is to deal with Alzheimer's patients and the caregivers for them. And we also have a winter women's film series and lots going on with the Conversations from Main Street for the season. Our season also officially kicks off for the performing arts on October 11th with Lou Graham, who is doing an acoustic night. He's the voice of Foreigner, and followed by the next night on Sweet Honey in the Rock, who does a wonderful a cappella group. So I hope you'll join us many more times, and you can find out what we've got going on by registering at landmarkonmainstreet.org. Follow us on Facebook or Twitter and Foursquare and all anywhere you think you can find us. So tonight, though, is a very, very special night. This is Daniel Paisner's fifth time on our stage. He's been here before with Girl in the Green Sweater was his first, and the Girl in the Green Sweater is actually here tonight. Christina Karen Hugger, thank you for being here tonight. He also interviewed Ron Darling, Gilbert Gottfried, and Coach Bob Hurley last season. So we're thrilled to have him back here tonight. He has co-authored more than 50 books, including books with Denzel Washington, Serena Williams, Ivanka Trump, and so many more. He has a new book coming out next week, and this is called Gaddafi's Point Guard. I'm sure he can tell you a little bit more about that when he's out. And the book that's the subject here tonight, A Surfer's Life, Scratching the Horizon, has just been released last month on paperback. You will get to know Izzy Paskowitz, who we're so thrilled to have tonight. Dan and Izzy will join us now, and there'll be a short introductory film so you can learn a little bit more about Izzy. Thank you for being here.
Which side are we supposed to be on?
I'll go that side.
Okay.
You all ready?
A few of you look like you're not surfers. So as Sharon said, before we get going, there's this really great video piece that was posted earlier this summer, the Yahoo News piece.
Right, yeah.
Which does a better job introducing Izzy than I could, or than Sharon could, or than any piece of literature we could leave for you. So before we get going, we just want to show this short video. It's 4 or 5 minutes long, and you'll get a sense of Izzy's backstory a little bit, and then we'll just kind of dive in. Thank you all for coming. Watch and enjoy. Sorry, Sean.
In the struggles for finding your place in life, do I just work or do I make the world a better place? I know exactly what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to be here on this planet to take out children with autism surfing.
You gotta help me out, okay?
Words can't express what it does for.
Can you hear me?
Did you turn it off again?
I might have. You know, to tell you the truth, I really had never watched that whole thing. I hate watching that. You know, I hate reliving some of the, the bad times. But I think one boy in particular, Aiden, who was the one that took 5 of us to get him out in the water, and it is the antithesis of what we are and what we do and how that works. When he's screaming and crying, and he was insanely difficult on that surfboard, but we were able to ride in and saw his face after that. It was amazing. So I'm glad I got to finally see it, or have enough guts to watch it. So it was pretty cool, and that was a gentleman who.
Just keep talking.
Technical
It
difficulties.
was a pain in the ass producer from New York, and he ended up making something absolutely beautiful, and I really appreciate that, and I appreciate you all being here, especially on 9/11. And it's a very somber day, but I think it's the ultimate day for us to shed a little enlightenment on what we do. What did I do?
You knocked it up. Hold on.
No, you're not going to deal with a consummate professional here. You're doing it with a surfer. Darren's a professional.
My sound is working fine, Izzy.
Wait, I figured it out.
What, did he drop it?
It's on the floor.
Do you understand the concept of how they work, right? So while Izzy's getting fixed, a couple of things. There's a special shout out we should all give to some of those best surfers on the planet that travel with Izzy and Surfers Healing. There's about 15, 16, 18 of you guys sprinkled around the audience here tonight.
Why don't you guys just stand up?
So stand up and let everybody say hello to you.
Thank you guys.
And the reason they're here is not just to see their buddy on stage, but because they're going to be at Lido Beach tomorrow morning doing one of these greatest days of Izzy's life type of events. And I would encourage all of you, if you got nothing on your calendar, to try to go down there and see what happens on the beach, because it's kind of magical. First time I did it, I decided I'd throw in with Izzy and help him write his book. So it's pretty transforming. Even if you have not been touched by a child on the spectrum, go check it out if you can. Thank you all for coming. Izzy, thank you for coming. The format of tonight's talk is going to be pretty informal. Those of you who've seen me on this stage before will know you can interrupt me, you can throw stuff at me, you can contradict me, do whatever you want, that's fine. We're going to talk about autism, we're going to talk about Surfers Healing, but I thought what we would do to start is talk a little bit about how Izzy grew up, because as you saw in that piece to start, he kind of had an unusual childhood.
Right.
Izzy, you grew up in a camper, in a 24-foot camper with 8 siblings. There were 9 of you and your parents, 11 people in a 24-foot camper.
Yeah.
And you just bounced around from wave to wave.
Unbelievable. Just logistics of that camper. It slept 6 people, and sticking 11 of us was insane. I mean, every inch of floor space was taken by us. And even today, I've got this phobia because my spot, and we had our spots. My sister was in a hammock, and someone was underneath her in the cab, and then there was 4 people on the floor in that little runway. There's 4 people in the back bed, and when everyone would get up and go pee, it inevitably would always get my hair stepped on, and I just freak out now. And the boys are helping me put on my wetsuit now when we do our events. Like, don't pull my hair, don't pull my hair. I freak out, just flashbacks to the camper. But that's a funny part of it. But it was like a dream, and I'm super glad that my dad did this amazing, crazy experiment. And my dad, he's a 93-year-old traditional Jewish doctor. Was in World War II, was in the Navy, and he should have been a millionaire. So he gave this self-imposed, poverty, which to me it set me up to have a child, to have a special child, and to be unique and to be completely different and to be completely, who I am. I think it was meant to be, and I think for me, a lot of my life and things that have happened have not been something that I should, and we all are taught to do, is to have these goals and do something very traditional and make a lot of money and do all these things. It's always been organic. Everything's has come naturally, and I've always had my eyes and ears open to the signs and to things that pose importance to me, and I follow that direction.
Now, not all your siblings, your brothers and your sister wouldn't necessarily agree with you. I mean, at different times in your lives as adults, things have not gone easy for some of you, right? I mean, you
Absolutely. Well,
don't have a traditional education.
They're losers.
That's why they're not here and Izzy is.
No, you know what? I think a little bit of in my opinion, with my brothers, I think a bit of their failures will blame it on my father. I think he presented the most unusual, interesting life to be who we were and to travel all around the world and to just and to be these Jewish surfers. And we would have, Sabbath, we'd do Shabbat on the beach, and be completely embarrassed to sing the Shema and have yarmulkes on, and, we're just in our shorts, these skin and bone little boys that are super dark. And eventually, after the embarrassment, wore off, our gringo friends would, join in and would hold hands and would sing Shema. So it worked,
Now, there's a great story. I thought we would get to it later, but we're kind of kissing it now. So let's talk about this. Izzy became bar mitzvah at the age of 13. Were you 13? Ish? You're 13-ish? On one of his family's cross-country trips. They made their way to New York. And Izzy was bar mitzvahed at Congregation Rodef Shalom, which those of you who live in the area, if you're Jewish, you might know, is a very nice, established, one of the oldest synagogues in the country, I think. And Izzy's in the back of his camper as they're driving cross country trying to commit his Haftorah to memory, right? And they've got this 24-foot camper piled high with surfboards and bicycles and fishing gear and all your crap. And you're like the Beverly Hillbillies rolling into town. And what happens? You hit some overpass on the West Side Highway?
Imagine driving that thing into the city. I mean, we've got nice Suburbans now, and we had this piece of crap, classy camper that has this big cab over, and then my dad built this platform on top of it. And then, like Dan says, all these surfboards are just filleted on the top. And we went through this overpass, and a God-shaking thud, and that gigantic rack ripped off and fell on the road, boards everywhere, stopped the entire freeway, and we got out and just tried to salvage whatever boards we could and threw them inside, and fire drill just to get out of there. But I was proud because I was the last brother, and I'm just number 4 in my family to have been bar mitzvahed. So I had to kind of memorize everything phonetically. I didn't have a rabbi to teach me how to really read Hebrew. And so we show up at this beautiful temple, and I was so nervous. Being in the middle with my brothers, some of them talked so damn much that they talked for me, and I never really talked too much. I was really quiet. So when time came to release all this information in Hebrew, I couldn't do it, and I choked. I was so embarrassed, and I was red in the face, and then all of a sudden I kind of tightened my belt, and I started to sing the prayer, and I memorized everything, and it was nice to have my dad's dad, to have him there, and Rose and Lou Paskowitz, and
They were members, by the way. They don't just let any surf dude family pull up in their camper and take the bima over there. So they were congregants, right?
Absolutely,
Okay.
yeah.
And you were wearing board shorts, I believe?
I forget what I was wearing. It was nice. It was nice after the craziness of breaking all our boards and having to go out and find new boards. It's not like now where everyone has nice new board. We had pieces of shit boards, and our shorts were from JCPenney's, and they were horrible spandex, and they were kind of these jammer type things with a big piece of rope to time to our bodies. And most of us, because back in that day, right around my bar mitzvah, it was a year where we learned how to light our flatulence. So imagine all these little boys with little holes in their butts from burning holes from lighting their farts. Forgive me, I'm digressing again. I'm not the professional.
That wasn't in our notes.
Help me out.
Can't take you anywhere, Israel. You guys have to realize, if you're outside the surf world, and if this culture is a little bit new to you, back in the 60s, Izzy's dad, Doc Paskowitz, and his family they were kind of like legends in the surf world. I mean, they epitomized, in a very real sense, what it meant to kind of check off the grid and bounce around and live and breathe and eat surf. And if you read surf magazines, I was talking to Pete today, one of the surfer dudes who are staying at my house or traveling with Izzy. And if you grew up around that time in the 1960s and you happened to be landlocked or you lived on the East Coast, you'd look to the Paskowitzes as emblems of what your life could be and what you might want your life to be. And a lot of us forget that now. Izzy now has touched thousands of lives through Surfers Healings, but the way he grew up, they were like a little rock star surf family, correct?
Yeah,
I mean, you read Surf Magazine back then, every issue there'd be a spread on you guys.
And I think now just that whole Paskowitz side of it has definitely embraced a bunch of like young surfers that do that, you know, but they're in a whole different way now. That these hipsters that are kind of traveling around in campers and kind of checking out and doing kind of the same thing we did, but with nicer gear.
It didn't happen all at once. You should keep this in mind too. I mean, Izzy's one of 11. Izzy's one of 9. He's number 4. It was not until child 5 or 6 came along that you guys were rolling, right?
Yeah.
You lived in a house. You lived in California. You lived in Hawaii.
We had a little bit of kind of, you know, a typical upbringing, living in San Marcos for a little bit. But before that, you know, most of us were born and raised in Hawaii, and that was really nice. I mean, back in the day when Duka Hanamoko was still alive, and my dad was so impressed by surfers. You know, he wasn't impressed by his colleagues who were doctors at that time in Honolulu. Surfers were everything to him, and he made a point of, you know, taking these little boys and giving us putting us in the Duke's arms, and it meant so much to him. And in retrospect, it's, you know, he was one of the greatest surfers in the world, and for us to be a part of that, and then to move to Israel after that, and to LA, and we lived a little bit of life of a typical child. But then for me, I think I kicked out at 5th grade, and that was it, you know. So I do struggle a little bit like Mowgli. I don't know my times tables. You know, I made an effort to start to read a hell of a lot more after working with Dan, which has been very helpful, because the whole transition into this and the whole progress of meeting Dan was very organic. It was one of my directors in North Carolina, and Dad had done something with a boy with autism, a book with
A kid named J-Mac, who was, a lot of you might remember, was a high school phenom basketball player. His coach put him in as a kindness the last game of the season. He tore it up. He scored 20 points in 3 minutes. I wrote a book with this kid. Nice book, wonderful family, great story. And Izzy's pal John, who sets up the camps down in North Carolina, found this book and put us in touch, which is a great thing.
And I truly didn't think I had a story that interesting. I know a lot more people with a lot more interesting stories than mine, so I didn't expect it to happen, you know, pretty quickly, you know, and to get a deal and then to rock it out. And I'm like, okay. Dan's like, okay, we got to go to work, and I couldn't remember shit. You know, it was just like, holy crap. And it's interesting the way your mind works. When we started to work, everything kind of just blossomed and just branched into just fresh memories.
But it's only Izzy's. I mean, it's entirely possible that Izzy really can't remember shit, because if I went back and asked any of his brothers or his sister, or I sat with his father for hours, they tell a completely different story. So you'll have to read their books too. But he really has lived a life that's not just book-worthy, but it's multi-volumes. And let's show you a little bit more. Sean, if you could cue up the piece on clip number C, letter C. There was a great video, a documentary done by, what's the name of the filmmaker? Called Surfwise.
Doug Prey.
And it came out in 2008. I'd actually seen it before I ever met Izzy or thought I'd be meeting Izzy. And there's some wonderful footage there that really shows you what life was like in the camper for them. It's about a 2-minute clip. We could take a look at that once it's ready to go, and then we'll bounce from there and move on to some other things. So this is from Surfwise.
You'll see that rack too, and it might be after the rack too.
Doran raised
There it
his
is.
children to be like wolves, because you could adapt anywhere you put him. And that's, I don't know if a wolf can do that, but I know the Paskowitz family could.
He wanted us to be unchained to a mortgage, to a bank, car payment, whatever, and just a moment's notice, just get in and go and leave it all behind. The next adventure is on its way.
Would wake up one morning and would be in Pensacola. Wake up another morning would be in Corpus Christi. Wake up in another morning would be in San Onofre.
Sometime we'd be driving north, and then Dorian would say, I don't know, this doesn't feel right. He'd turn the car around and start driving south, and he'd say, there, that's it. We should be going south.
San Francisco, Baja,
Florida,
Venezuela,
Mexico,
Alabama,
El Paso,
Maine, Virginia,
Malibu,
South Dakota.
We just go spur of the moment, go wherever.
So one day I'm laying in bed and I hear this squeak, squeak, and I look out the window and here comes this god-awful hunk of metal.
And they come up to the driveway.
And then the door would fly open, and here they all come.
Here they come.
And then a bunch of half-breeds, naked and wild maniac hairdos,
And need a shower and food and stuff like that.
we were all so close. I mean, I guess that's why we always went somewhere where my dad could just open the door and let us just scatter.
Open the camper door, go out, do your thing. Lunch is at noon.
If you went into the Paskowitz motorhome, Juliet was always sweeping sand, sand, sand. But she always had beautiful fresh flowers in a vase, and she always had opera music on. Always.
Juliet had the most magnificent contralto voice I had ever heard it. And every single day she wove music into the fabric of our lives.
And as we traveled, we taught them about other cultures, the way other people live, different foods. And we would read for hours, just quietly reading.
I wasn't some kind of avant-garde, radical, intellectual. I just wanted my kids around me, surfing with me, and education be damned.
It sounds good to say we were one step ahead of the truant officer, but that didn't really happen. Because if you don't go into the system, they don't even know you exist.
And the kind of things that your parents would have said, you can go to school because it's safe, but don't go swimming with sharks because it's dangerous. Our parents said, well, you can go swimming with sharks, but you're not fucking going to school because that shit's dangerous.
So there you got to meet a couple of Izzy's adult siblings. There was also a guy in the sound bite earlier. If you saw his name, he was tagged Tube Steak Tracy. Did you guys notice that? Tube Steak, for those of you who don't know who he is, well, Izzy, why don't you tell these folks who Tube Steak passed away last year.
He passed away last year. He's just the icon of Malibu. He grew up with the original Gidget and named this young gal, Kathy Kohner, Gidget, and was the father of all those Beach Blanket Bingo movies, and he was the character in those movies, the Big Kahuna. But his real nickname was Tube Steak, and if you can imagine what that meant. And so most of the characters, their nicknames were right from the beach, right into the movie. And so he was a beautiful man, and his family helped us start Surfers Healing, and he'll be sorely missed, and he was hysterical. And I miss him dearly.
So those are the kinds of folks Izzy grew up with. I mean, Doc was friends with a lot of these guys. When he lived in Hawaii, he surfed with the legends of the sport, right?
Unbelievable, yeah. And because he wanted to be with those guys. He wanted to be with the surfers, and didn't really appreciate being a doctor. And I don't know. I mean, it was amazing that he did what he did at the right time, to have all of us.
When one of your brothers was bouncing through your itinerary there, telling every place where you stopped along the way, they did not pick up the fact that you made 2 trips to Israel. You lived in Israel twice as a kid for about 4 or 5 months each stretch. Your father spent some time there as a young man before he started and found your mother. And he is credited with introducing the sport of surfing to Israel, correct?
Yeah, and surfing in Israel is gigantic. I mean, there's 1 million surfers, and it's the culture, the surfboards, the clothing, and he is the father of surfing. And he brought surfboards with, imagine back then in the 50s, with a big Magan David on it, the Star of David on his surfboards, brought them to Israel, which ended up sitting in customs for months because they didn't know what the hell they were. Customs thought they were some type of amphibious assault vehicle. And then once he got them out, they were there, and he taught a couple of people to surf. And that part of it's so nice, that just the heritage and the time and space of the people that he met, giving the boards to Topsy Konsolpolsky, and now we're friends with, his grandchildren, are amazing. And I loved it. I kind of followed in his footsteps, and after a while, I was a poor surfer, and I started working at 15. When I had to jump out of that camper, anything was better than the camper, because I wanted to, be myself. And I ended up, moving to Israel and living there for a while, and living off the goodwill that my father had established back in the 50s. But unfortunately, I met that beautiful blonde lady with a great ass, Danielle, 2 weeks before my trip. And I stayed over there for 6 months, and she wrote me letters, and I still have these corny letters, and eventually, had to come back, and we've been together for 27 years now.
So at what point did you realize when you were a kid that other kids weren't growing up quite this way? That what was going on in your camper, the way you were with your siblings, the way your family interacted was not the norm? Or did you ever have that realization?
Yeah, I mean, more so, like after 13, 14, it was, the grass is always greener on the other side, and we, for us, it was very, very basic. We just wanted sugar. I mean, my dad was an amazing nutritionalist and health food nut, so we just wanted M&Ms, and then after 15, 16, then we wanted beer. the sugar was bad enough, but shit, beer, man, he would kill us, so I had to go.
But up until then, 6, 8, 10 years old, you weren't looking at how the other half was living? You weren't saying, I want television, I want to be in school, I want to hang out with girls my own age?
No, kind of just, we rolled with the plan. He wanted to take us everywhere, and we went to some amazing places, and then we went to some real kind of not so amazing places like Martin, South Dakota, and lived on properties off this Indian reservation, and my dad was a doctor, and we had all these surfboards, and it was snowing, and we'd take the boards on the snowbanks, and hell, we didn't know. It was interesting and fun, and we made the best out of it.
Your dad had some pretty interesting ideas about money, and from what I understand from talking to you, from talking to him, from reading what I could find on your family, he would tend to not work until he had to. And then when the well was a little bit dry, he would get out this book that your brother refers to in the documentary and look for a job that nobody else wanted in a clinic or somewhere, and he'd respond to that, and off you guys would go.
Yeah.
So he ran through his money, and then when he needed more, he went back to work.
Yeah, that's interesting for a child to know that, when I'm so young, and I knew we had like piles of $10 bills at the time were a lot when they were out. The whole family knew that those $10 bills were out. And the whole family knew that as soon as we got from Mexico and had enough gas to get across the border, that he was gonna writing a bad check for milk at Hollandia Dairy in San Marcos. I knew that, and I was 9 years old or something, so.
There's a piece, Sean, if you could cue up clip letter E from the Surfwise documentary. I remembered seeing this piece before I ever met Izzy, and it was the one piece that drew me not more so, but alongside the autism piece, to your story. And it was told in an anecdote offered by your brother Moses, I think. Check this out, and then we'll come back a little bit. We'll talk about some of Doc's ideas about money, about how you guys made things work when you were growing up. And then we'll fast forward a little bit and talk about what you're doing today. So, Sean, when you got that, that's, what did I say, E? E, letter E, as in Edward. Guys, feel free to jump in with questions if you have. We're here
right
for
now,
you.
after this.
Not now.
That's the one he'd take.
Doc really hates money. He believes that it is the root of all evil. One of his aunties left him, I think, something like 40 grand. And he said, no, the way my life is together now, $40,000 would change it, and I don't want it to change.
We live with difficulty, with hardships, with deprivations, all of which to us are the prices that we pay for the things we think to be elementally important. When we begin to take more than we actually need, I tell my kids we take from somebody else.
In some little teeny town in Louisiana, we pulled over into the state park and he says, guys, there it is. We're down to our last dime. And it was the fucking dime. And he was excited because he knew that that dime represented another challenge for him and his family. And we picked up that dime and went forward.
We were so effing poor that there was never any money for presents or anything like that. So at one point, Doc gave his children the C, so to speak. You know, it was like a birthday deal where he would take the kid out into the ocean and he'd be like, son, I give you the C. And like, every kid was undoubtedly disappointed, you know what I mean?
There were times where, for sure, we could not have dressed everybody all at once together at once. But there were times where, like, one guy could have a bitchin' outfit. And you really have to think about that. That was heavy, dude.
I mean, honestly, I don't remember having girls' underwear. My mom would argue with me, but she's blocked a lot out.
And when you were standing around, 11, 12, 13, 14-year-old kids all lined up, and, at 6.5%, 7% body fat, it looks like either it's a xylophone contest or something, or people are wrong there. They're wrong. Why aren't those kids fattened up?
Why aren't these kids in school?
What's the matter with you?
How do you do this to these children?
Why aren't you working to support these kids? What kind of parents are you?
They were so...
So the story that stayed with me was that last dime. I thought, what a moment in a family. And when I asked Izzy about it, when we rolled up our sleeves and started working on this, he had a completely different take than his brothers. I don't know if you remember this when we sat down and talked about this, but you told me that you weren't excited by that. You were terrified.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we wanted to eat. I mean, because we live very bare bones. So, I definitely knew hunger, and we drink a lot of water just to supplement, for food. But yeah, I mean that part I think was the only part for me that that felt tough as a young child.
Was that talked about among your brothers when you were stepping on each other's hair at night, trying to go to sleep?
I think now some of them that it affects them and they feel like they still need to talk about it. But for me, it's it's the past, and the future is my family. The future is still yet to be written. So it doesn't bother me, but it bothers me that to this day some of the brothers that maybe are unsuccessful in their own relationships might feel that that was part of what was done that might affect them now, and I disagree with that. I think we were offered an opportunity that made us hone what we were good at. And what you were good at ended up being what you did for a job and did for a living and what you did to make money. And I think that was a blessing, because if you have a job you like, you're going to have a great life.
So let's talk about your family now. Forget these people in the camper.
Yeah,
Let's talk about your
over them.
camper. He is a proud new grandpa, by the way. Coolest grandpa in California.
Thank you.
So Izzy has 3 beautiful children. Your oldest is Ella. Israella, who's the mommy, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I named her Israella. I was hoping for a boy after me. And then Isaiah was right after her, a year after our autistic son, who's 22 now. And Elijah, our 17-year-old. So I kind of stuck with the Old Testament, with my father had started with all of us, but I thought it was nice.
Now,
although they were all baptized. I married a Polish Catholic gal, and all the children are, up there and they're getting baptized. I baptize you, Isaiah Paskowitz. We got this right.
As a child of this famous surfing family, as a world champion longboard surfer yourself, you had some dreams that you wanted to carry forward to the next generation. And you told me that when Isaiah was born, one of the first things you thought about was one day surfing with him. And it was a couple of years later when you realized that that wasn't going to happen, not in the way that you imagined. It's happened in a whole different way, a bigger way. But it took you a while to come around to accepting that.
And my life has been kind of very transparent, and some of you here, I know some of you have been to, our camps that, if I may shamelessly plug, we do a week-long camp in San Diego. You can come live our life in this life as a surfer. There's some brochures, but some of the
campers,
footage
of that too, if you want to show that later, if we have time.
But some of the campers have been here, and they've been with me at 20 years ago, or not 20 years, maybe 15 years ago, at my worst time. When I was still dealing with Isaiah, and they're showing up to surf camp, and I'm just not in a good place. I haven't really dealt with my son. I haven't really dealt with the fact that he's not going to be a pro surfer. He's not going to be a great surfer. He's not even going to be a surfer. He's Isaiah. He's autistic, and he's going to be just nothing near the dream that I hope he would be. But that part took a long time to get over, and I've shared that with them in the book, and a lot of my friends here that know that now see a different Izzy, that don't see that young guy that was dealing with a child, and very young. I mean, I was 23 or something like that, and Danielle was 19 when we got married. But I think Isaiah brought us closer together. I truly don't think we'd be together if we didn't have him.
But you kind of ran away from home for a little bit. I mean, you were still surfing, you were on the tour, so there was a legit reason to leave, right? But you told me at that point, when Isaiah was little, you weren't winning trophies anymore, right? You were.
No, there was some really good years of winning, championships internationally, and I've got and those trophies and stuff are, they're packed away, and I sold some of them, bronze statues that help us start Surfers Healing, that mean absolutely nothing to me. And some people are like, hey, do you still have that hang 10 trophy out of bronze? That, man, back then they spent $5,000 on this trophy, and you still got it. It's worth a lot of money. I give a shit about that. It means nothing to me. But now what means the most to me is that I can connect with Isaiah, but in the water. He's a big dude that loves the water, and I love that aspect that we can connect. Expectations in the bar gets lower, but that's fine. After a while, you have made something, or he has made something, the fountainhead of something that is enormous. To have been at Belmar a few days ago, and there's 7,000 people on the beach, and this giant circus, and everyone there is autistic, having an amazing time, and my son's at home probably napping and has no idea, what he has done, no idea who how he has affected his dad and touched so many thousands of people after 15 years of doing this. So I'm lost.
Well, let's bring you back a little bit. Surfers Healing happened kind of organically. As we saw in that early clip, Danielle was talking about how you just kind of stumbled across the fact that Isaiah did well in the water, that he was a different person after spending a day on the beach, after splashing around. And slowly, other people on the beach, other families with kids on the spectrum, they would reach out to you and ask you if you would maybe take their kids out for a ride. And that was how Surfers Healing started. There's one story that you told me, and we wrote about it in the book, and it's my favorite story, and I hope I can prevail upon you to tell it here. But one of the very first times you took somebody else's child out to surf, it was a pretty rough day. And in retrospect, you say you probably shouldn't have been out there that day. This is with your buddy John Shestak?
Yeah.
With his kid Dove? You want to tell us that story? How old was Dove?
Dove. Pretty dang young. He's the same age as Isaiah. They're both 22 now.
So he was 7 or 8?
He was a little skinny little guy. He was probably 7 or 8. And John at the time founded Cure Autism Now, him and his lovely wife, Portia Iverson. And they did amazing things for autism. before they kicked him out at Autism Speaks. But he's kind of a rebel, kind of an asshole Hollywood producer, hard to deal with. So he ended up not being a part of Autism Speaks now, which is an enormous conglomerate. But John shows up one day, this Hollywood producer, and was great at helping us start our first Surface Healing benefit concert. And I knew nothing about autism, and he drove down in his piece of crap Cadillac, just stinking of vodka gimlets in his crappy suit, but was able to relay to the audience, this wonderful story of his son and some very technical points on autism, which I really didn't know anything. So I invited him to bring Dove down, and this day was just gigantic. The waves are probably as tall as the ceiling, and at that time I was really in good shape, and I knew my limitations, and I think this day exceeded it. Because I get down to the beach, and the first thing that happens is I'm doing something with this chuck. I got this giant board, which is 12 feet long, and it's built for two people. It's called a tandem board, and I've got this young boy holding his hand. I'm dragging him down the beach. Lifeguard Jeep rolls up, and it's my buddy Jeff Kramer, and he goes, I think you better reconsider this. It's giant out there. And at that time, Dove didn't even have a life vest, and I said, no, I think I got this. And he said, well, okay, I'm on the beach. I'll keep an eye on you. And John, unknowing to any kind of, danger, out there, being complete, landlubber, and had no idea what was going on in the ocean and the power and the magnitude of the situation, says, oh, just take him out. He'll be fine. It'll be great. And so I grabbed Dove. I waited and watched the waves come in and was timing the swells as they came in groups, and then the lulls in between. And the lulls in between weren't very great, and I needed to get past the break, past that big shore pound before another set would come. And because there's nothing that I could do if something hit us. It was that big. So throw Dove on, and we head out. And I think we're gonna make it. It's calm for a second, and we go as fast as I can. And I'm hyperventilating, and I'm getting out there as fast as I can. And here comes a set, and they start the corduroy on the horizon, and it gets bigger and bigger. These mountains coming at me, and we got clipped by one of them that broke right in front of us, and instantly his Walmart booty just flew off, and we're able to regain our composure. He stayed on the board. I didn't lose him, meaning he didn't die at that moment. Wait for it. And then I haul ass, and we made it past the break, and we got outside to these giant waves, and there was maybe one or two people out there, and we're sitting out there with these giant mountains, just bouncing up and down. And at the concussion of that first wave, it did something to his mouth, and I see blood dripping from his chin. And I'm like, oh, shit, what did I do? Oh, bad choice is, I'm looking on the beach, there's John looking like, awesome, rad. And I'm so scared, I'm terrified. And I kind of reach into his mouth, and I pull out the blood, and then I see as I turn his head that his tooth was loose. It's his first tooth. So it was hanging on by a thread. And so I was able to just grab it out of his mouth. And I have this tooth. And I'm like, if my son lost his first tooth, this is a big deal. This tooth fairy and all that. Especially, having our special kid. We want to just be normal. So this was important. So I take the tooth, I put it in my mouth, and I got the tooth there, and we sat out there, and here comes a big wave, and we catch it, and we drop in, and I'm just so focused on when I stand up, he's by himself for a second, and I reached down, and I grabbed Dove, and I lifted him up, and we flew down the line, and almost slow motion, riding such a big wave with this boy. And as we ride in from San Onofre, the spot I grew up as a child, as we ride in, and then the wave behind us closes out, and I jump to my stomach, and we lay down prone, and we ride it out, and we washed up on the beach. It wasn't a pretty exit to the ride. And I grabbed the board, I grabbed Dove's hand, my heart's pounding, and I run up to John, who still doesn't know, like, you know, his son almost died a couple of times, and I made him bleed, and John looks at me and is like, where the fuck's his booties? Oh, his piece of shit, $2 booties. I think that's all you care about. Your son almost died. But you know, but I didn't tell him, and so I reach into my mouth and I said, you might want to keep this, and I give him his tooth, and we've been best friends ever since.
That's a real Hollywood moment. Here, you might want to keep this.
What's that? He was amazing, and Dove was very affected by autism, and he has some other, physical issues. He's very frail, but he was kicking and screaming, going out, kind of like Aiden, the boy there, but riding in, he was, doing the sound kind of, wee the whole way in, and so he just responded incredible, which I think all our kids with autism respond amazing to water. And it's not just, the riding the waves, that's just our gift, because I'm, a surfer, and I know some amazing surfers who are my friends and can elevate, this ride into something really magical and exciting to watch. So, but I think the premise of the water, when Isaiah's in the water, when he's in a jacuzzi or the pool, it's very, parallels a lot of other children with autism that love the water, and very calming and soothing with anybody. I mean, I think just our kids are built for it. I think they need the water, and surfing is amazing for them, and they're water children.
So out of that moment, slowly, you grew Surfers Healing. You ran a couple of camps out in the LA area, right? It's around San Diego.
Yep.
Where was your first one? And
first one was at San Onofre, and that was close to 15 years ago. And it was just, it was very difficult in that aspect of that transition from the parent to the water, and needing the parent just to get out of the way and let us, do our job and take the kids in the water, and it almost, it looks, to somebody who doesn't understand, difficult, but with myself and the patience of our guys, they don't hear the screaming and the crying, and they have been pooped on and bit and scratched and kicked, but something magic happens, and I think more than just even the magic of the water and everything, and just that day of enlightenment, of inclusion and acceptance of we're all in this together. And I feel so much better knowing that I've got this huge autism family that I'm part of, and that when I'm away and I miss my son, when I'm with this autism family, I'm home. And I really mean that. I really feel that. All right, let's go have a drink at the pub. Are we done?
No, you're not done yet. These people might want to ask you some questions. You should know, though, before you raise your hand and start asking questions, they figured a few things out since poor Dove took this wild ride with Uncle Izzy. So now the kids do wear life vests, right?
They do.
And they do make sure their booties are fastened on pretty tight before they go.
Yes. And Wild Godchild manages our attorneys. Those are our pro bono attorneys. God bless them.
But they now do, I think this summer, Jeff, you're going to take 3,000 kids? So there are one-day camps now up and down the California coast. They do Mid-Atlantic.
California, East Coast, New Mexico, Puerto Rico,
Toronto. And from here, they're going to go Lido Beach tomorrow. Stop by if you can. Friday, they'll be out in Montauk. And then from there, they're going to take the ferry and go up to Narragansett. So these guys have a lot of work ahead of them. It's a pretty amazing thing. If you have a chance to come out and take a look, please do. I saw some hands.
Any questions?
Well, while I go for the microphone
We have
here,
Vanna White.
Can I also just point out our partner, Dolphin Bookshops, is here, and they're selling books tonight. So you can buy books, and they'll be out to sign. So thank you.
So I'm kind of curious. When you first started the camp, how did people find out about it? So people showed up.
Repeat the question.
When you first started the camp, how did people find out about it? So you had people actually showing up and bringing their autistic children, et cetera.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's the easy part. Autism is so prevalent. There's so many kids out there, and autism is such a small little growing community. That part was easy. I think within our community in San Juan Capistrano, a lot of Isaiah's schoolmates heard about what we did, and it was great for me to try it out first with some of his buddies who we became best friends with, and I was amazed at the progression of each child. It was amazing, the transformation in the water, but also I got better and better with dealing with that transition and the anxiety of the mom and dad releasing the boy or the girl, and dealing with somebody struggling who might not want to do this at first and might not know he wants to do this, and then once we got it wired, it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing, because we really, like you saw in some of those waves, we try to get real radical and really ride the wave to its fullest, and make the parent watch that and see us surf through the children almost. I don't want them out there. They don't know what they're doing. It could be dangerous. But yes, absolutely, the parents are so protective that it's like, wanting to follow us out. But, we're out there, in waves with these big boards, and you got to know what you're doing. So the biggest part of what I do with our children, and I always promise the best guys in the world, and it'll be safe, and it'll be amazing, and it'll be super radical.
There's, if you hang out and watch these guys on the beach, I noticed after a couple of times, I would see Izzy out past the break with a kid for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, sometimes a half an hour, and they're not catching any waves. They're just kind of hanging out there. So after a while, I asked Izzy what was going on, and he said that's his very favorite part of the day. The kid is away from his parents. He's away from the world. He's away from the noise and nonsense that's going on the beach, and he's just kind of out there alone in the water with his new best friend, Uncle Izzy, and you guys just hang, and sometimes you don't talk at all.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I try to get as much language out of the kids as possible, tell stories and stuff, or whatever is needed, but yeah, it's that part of it, and each kid's so different, and I mean, Jeff mentioning, the number of kids, it's like, to 3,000 kids, and everyone is so individual, and they need such, special care, and need so much, love and support. It's a big venture, so, but it works amazing. I mean, it absolutely has perpetuated itself in a very grassrootsy kind of level, and we've been kind of rolling for a long time now. You had a question?
I'm going to try to be succinct. I am a retired special needs teacher, so I'm very curious. First, to just elaborate a little on your son. Where is he on the spectrum? Is he verbal?
Isaiah is, he doesn't converse, so I know he has a tremendous cognitive ability. Mm-hmm. Expressive language is super difficult for him, and with that comes frustration and his tantrums, and I never know when those tantrums are. Is it that day? Is it a month ago? Is it a year ago? So Isaiah's, he's on that low spectrum, which is good, because if you can handle, my son who's 6'3", and, has been 330 pounds, he's down to 280, lean protein, we can handle anything. And maybe that was, supposed to be that way.
Right. My next question would be, with this camp, is it divided where you have children that go to the range of Asperger's autism? I mean, it's still evolving all the time, even when we think we know about it. Do you have it divided as such? And do you have people that are trained personnel that come out with you? to work with these children?
All my guys, I think, are so trained in the aspect of the water and surfing. And they are just naturally given that they love doing this. This isn't a job for them. They lose money. Their rent is going to come up, next month, and they're going to have a damn time coming up with rent because they're going to lose money for this time volunteering. But they're such amazing surfers, and they know the behavior of the children, and it doesn't affect them, and they're okay with it. So we do have a great, variance of spectrum of all the kids that are handled just very naturally by each of the guys. Some of the kids that have no language that I can't believe can follow instructions, without giving us that feedback that they have understood that, okay, hands, knees, stand up and ride a wave in, or riding waves in by themselves. That part of it is absolutely amazing.
So I'm to assume that there is no criteria going in for which families can bring which child?
To ours, no requirements other than, I have an autistic son, so I focus on autism. Absolutely not. I mean, they don't need to know how to swim. We have a weight limit because we ride waves, as you saw, and you have to. I think our weight limit was 60 pounds, but 300-pound children like my son will show up, and what are you going to do? Send them away? So we deal with it, and they will try to do rides by themselves, or whatever each one of those children can do to their fullest capacity. And we know how to kind of progress at a real rapid, pace to whatever those children are receptive to.
There's a
surfers.
little bit of a limit. There's a sort of a first come, first serve limit. I mean, there's only so many surfers and so many, not by age, not by, right. So if you manage to get accepted into this, if you're smart, if you follow what's going on the internet and you hop on day one, they'll accept you with open arms, which is a kind of a cool thing. There is, before we get to more questions, if you guys are interested, if not, we don't have to, but you asked about Isaiah. There is about a 90-second clip. If you guys want to meet Isaiah and see how he's doing now, there's a piece there that you guys might enjoy. Is that a yay or is that a nay?
How about just real quick, sir, you had a question real quick.
So Sean, hang on while he's asking that question, if you can cue up G.
Go ahead.
Just a couple of things. First, as an aside, I grew up in Southern California in the 60s surfing and being Jewish, which I always felt a part of the community, but not quite as sort of area as all my friends, with their blonde hair.
Yeah.
So, just as an aside, when I found out about you guys, I heard the name Paskowitz. I was like, well, no, wait, they're Jewish. And then when I found out you were, and I remember this one picture of you, I guess in one of Chinese, you had this red wetsuit on. You looked like a god, but you were like Jewish. I was like, wow, it's like this is like so cool. It's like I can feel like I really belong there. So just as an aside, that was an effect you had on.
That's very cool.
Me personally, because it just made me feel like, oh, okay, it's cool. It's like I can be there and cool.
And I absolutely appreciate it, and I feel so, proud to be, a Jewish surfer, and I'm really proud to have a Mexican mom to make me look weird too. So.
But I do have a question, because I am sort of naive on autism. I wanted to ask you what goes on in a child and in an adult autistic mind. What is their world like, and then what is their world like when they're surfing? Because I always felt, I live in my world, you live in your world,
Yeah.
we live in all of our worlds. Well, if someone's living in their world, but they're mostly cool in their world and they're okay, who's to say my world's better than their world?
Right.
So I'm curious about
That part I wish I knew. I struggle every day to connect with my son. And I still am trying to connect with him and trying to get him to speak to me and looking into his eyes and trying to read every nuance of whatever he's trying to relay. He speaks, but he doesn't speak in words. So I wish I knew. We can only take with what we see from people with language like Temple Grandin and kind of put it all together, that are on the spectrum, that have language and can tell us a story of how their lives were when they were profoundly, affected, and now that have language but have all those other issues. I wish I knew, I wish I knew. I thought my son would speak a lot more for some reason, but he didn't, he is who he is, and if he's comfortable with it, I'm fine with it. With him, it's just behavior. Having such a big guy, behavior can be gnarly, and I don't like him, doing like the things that he does to himself, like autistic kids do, are insane. I mean, it's still, I will never be used to, him freaking out and the way he hits himself and the way, the contusions on his head, and he makes himself bleed, and it's insane. And I'm so thankful that it hasn't been around. It hasn't manifested itself in a couple of years with my son. So it's taken a long time for him to be okay, I think, with who he is. And now he's just this big, mellow, kind of old man that I am his guide, for the rest of his life. And and everything else that goes with it that I don't want to think about. Where is he going to live, and how productive can he be? Am I selfish to keep him at home? He might want to, live in an assisted living place, but how can I do that to him? How can I send him somewhere else when who's going to clean him the way I do? I bathe him, every day. Who's going to clean his butt the way I do? If he's going to get a rash, he's going to have a fit if he's at an assisted living. All those things are all present, and you just live with it. But I do wish, I knew what was in his head.
But when they're in the water, something changes, some kind of bliss happens, or some.
No, that part, absolutely. And I mean, some of the stories that have come out of 15 years of doing this, and thousands of children on the spectrum that have been in the water, and a lot of kids without language that have come out, and just the last camp. And I hate even bringing it up because it almost overpromises, a miracle. But a lady that was in one of the Carolina camps, and her son was nonverbal, and he just said surf. And she knew he said surf 200 times that day because he's never said anything. So that part of it is, there's something magic that I think just changes just their norm. Out of the box, they're going to do something completely different, and they're looking up to us with an insane receptor of what do I do? And I think that kind of shakes things up. Want to get to your...
Yeah, take a look at Isaiah. Now, this is a little preamble here. There's a wonderful reality series. If you guys can find it online, I'd encourage you to do so, called The Swell Life. The Oprah Winfrey Network followed Izzy's immediate family around for a year or so. It was the very first show signed by the OWN network. Never really went anywhere, but there's some great stuff in there. So if you're interested in Izzy's story and Isaiah's story, check it out. There was some great footage of Isaiah through the years that we pulled for this, but Sean was telling me before, it's encrypted in a weird way. The Oprah folks don't like to share, apparently. So this is a piece from the Surfwise documentary, and it's about 5 years old, but there should be a little blip in there. You should get a sense of how Isaiah is now. I think I'm remembering the right clip, but this is Izzy where he lives.
The water affects the children, on the spectrum. My son's on the spectrum, high functioning, but I've tried to get him to surf. He doesn't surf. But there is something very magical about the ocean, and I think even all of us in here that enjoy the time that we do spend in the water can acknowledge that. Very positive that goes on when you're in the ocean and that experience, so that it carries over for children that are on the spectrum. I think it's extension of whatever that vibe is, if you would. So that's, I think, a commonality that connects people that are and that are not affected. But my question for you really is, what was the moment, or there are a series of events that went on in Isaiah's life where he went from having the fundamentals of a vocabulary to not? Were there moments, were there inoculations? What was there a fulcrum or a tipping point that you saw or that your son encountered where he went from having some levels of expressive language to none?
Yeah. Yeah, I think right before 2 years old. And, you know, and going back to, you know, the inoculations, I think with Isaiah, you saw some of his language when he was saying daddy and stuff and really connecting. It's amazing because it's completely different than he was, you know, after he got autism, after he developed, you know, into about 50 words and then nothing. So, but and there was at that point where he did have, you know, all his injections, and then even a few more because we went on this trip to Brazil. But I think there was a lot of other things that maybe have contributed to that, and he might have been predisposed, very allergic. He always had a really runny nose and sneezing, and that might have been part of it. I can only say from my experience, and I think me and my wife have that same, you know, thought that maybe there were things that presented itself, and a combination of an unperfect storm, you know, might have attributed to what autism is, and also environmental stuff. So nobody really knows, and that's the bottom line, you know. So and that part's unbelievably crazy at this time and age that nobody knows. And he very much had that a regressive, you know, form of autism. We progressed completely normally, was so cute and so amazing, and then completely regressed. And then that's why we were talking in there about him. He must be deaf and all the other things that I know a lot of parents go through to figure out what is the really root cause. You know, almost hoping that there is a problem, almost hoping maybe there's a little bit of brain cancer. You know, as bad as that sounds, that maybe he's operable, and then he'll be normal after that. But you know. Who knows? I mean, I really hope something comes of it now, because now I've got an adult that that is kind of on the forefront of a lot of other children and adults behind him that are going to be a huge drain to the economy, and something needs to be done about it, because it's going to be worse as these adults need placement, and I pass away, and I have, you know, my son and a million other children. Yes, sir. You know, I would say 99% of the time, you know, even in the hardest case of the anxiety level of getting the kids in the water, when they're out there, they're absolutely, you know, in heaven. And a lot of times they'll start the crying back again, and crying because they want to go back in. But we have 200 kids on the beach, and every child is only have enough time for 20, 30 minutes.
And have you seen any breakthroughs where kids who were less communicative coming out of that initial experience and somehow are trying to communicate that to breakthroughs?
Absolutely. There's been some, you know, and like I said, I don't want to even, you know, talk about some of the amazing, almost miracle type of breakthroughs, because they're still autistic. It's an amazing, wonderful day that if not just for a wonderful, fun, healthy time, isn't that enough? But I know even doing with what we do, they're having so much fun, there's a therapeutic value to it. And I think there's a lot of studies of like water sensory therapies and laying in pools and stuff, and that is incredibly calming for the children. But it's that part of the gnarliness of the kids and the parents not believing that we can handle each one of these special children, you know, with kid gloves. Is I think our specialty.
Izzy calls it extreme special ed.
Yeah, I love that one. I love that. I really, that's.
Any more? Do we have questions? How are we doing on time, Sharon? Are we good? We have.
As an educator and sympathetic to what you're saying about the cost to society and to the children and the families, have any quote-unquote specialists in the field reach out to you to say there is some interesting research that could be done here? Or have you, as a foundation, reached out to the specialists in the field to say, we have anecdotal information that is very positive, and maybe there's something here that could contribute to our knowledge, especially to those who are teachers of special need children.
Absolutely. And two parts of that answer is you got to have a little faith. If you know that, if you don't have proof that there's God out there, there is God out there. And then also we have had a doctor come down and go through and have the parents fill out information and have that information that a lot of parents and not parents but people in the autism world that are clinicians and teachers, nothing is real and is tangible, especially for a bunch of dumb surfers that are tattooed up and look like a bunch of bikers, unless you have data that proves that it really is something that works. And she had some amazing data. I'll forward you her PowerPoint presentation that she presented at this huge lecture, that each of the children did have a lot more focus to whatever schoolwork that they were doing. That was very tangible, and it was fantastic. So yeah, we are working on stuff like that in grants through colleges that have people come down, and we'll get some data and have to, to show any naysayers that this really does work. And there can be some data that proves it.
There's a young lady in the front over
Young
here.
lady in the front.
Good. First of all, I want to thank you for helping my husband with his midlife crisis.
And you're very welcome, and I would like him. I'm very grateful that he's helped me with my fourth.
If you check out his Facebook page, there's a picture of him surfing a really tiny wave, and he keeps threatening to get attacked. Izzy, I have a connection to the story in a different way. I'm a sibling of a disabled older brother. My dad, also a Jewish doctor, is here. And we are of a generation where when we went out in public with my brother, we'd be asked to leave restaurants, leave movie theaters. He had no behavioral issues, but physically, people found him difficult to look at. So I'm kind of a generation before you.
Yeah.
You've talked a lot about what you gift to the child on this day, but you haven't really covered what it's like for a family to belong somewhere and not stand out as atypical, to have a place on your beach at your camp for a week and not have to worry if their kids screaming their head off or whatever kind of behavior that makes them feel so separate from the public in general. Could you talk about that a little bit?
I think for that, hopefully some of you can come see for yourself. It's hard to put in words, the effect of that day, not just on the child, but on that family. It's a huge impact on the family of acceptance and having this huge family and a safe place where the kids can do whatever they want. It's a safe place to, just be a child. So I really can't put in words unless you really come see what happens, and because that part of it is just as amazing to just, keep the water at your back and watch the parents' reaction, and that day of inclusion. It's something, you're right, we don't talk about, but it's so fitting and it's so amazing. And we're looking at doing more and more of that with not just our one-day camps, but we're doing 3-day camps now and more, where it's just only autism families. And that, I love being a part of that. That part is so magic and so fun, to take the kids out and the whole parents and everybody, but then to be all together, complete strangers, and have a wonderful few days of surfing together. So I hope you can check our I know you haven't yet, so you need to. Dan has. I can't get rid of Dan. I can't get rid of Dan. You need to come next.
There was another question in the front.
Please.
One of the things I wanted to know is I work with kids in an after-school program in the city, and it's the first of its kind of program, and it came from a parent out of necessity, out of need to produce something for her child, and that was different and on a higher spectrum of whether it be autism, whether it be Asperger's, whether it be learning difference or speech problem, behavioral problems, the full spectrum of that. One of my questions is do you cross over? Do you have the door open to other kids that are struggling and be a part of like school programs or after school programs, or are there schools that have reached out to you or different programs saying, hey, we've got a community of these special kids, and some of them are physically capable of doing certain things and some of them are not. And I just found it fascinating. I'm a learning different adult, and I grew up in a time where, I was considered retarded. So the difference of being a different kid and I found it with animals, I found it with horses, I found it at the beach with my dad and my family, and the comfort of being that kind of child where nature took over. And that's what I think with autism and with all these special kids, that's where it comes. It's a place where they're comfortable because
No, I completely understand. And for us, it's like we have bit off more than we can chew. I mean, every one of our camps, the whole website crashes. The 3,000 spots are taken up in 20 minutes. So we have more children that we can handle. And I'd like to, in our mission of what we do is focus on autism. And even the most disabled child are able to serve. And some more than others. I mean, we do a Down Syndrome Day in Belmar and have been for 9 years, but it's greatly different for the Downs kids, just by their physicality and their makeup. That we can't do what we do with children with autism. So it's just meant to be that I have a child with autism, and the kids thrive in the water, and what we do on the boards are just perfect for autism. But we have taken out a bunch of different disabilities, and and people have showed up to the events profoundly retarded, and of course we're going to take them out,
I was just wondering if anybody has reached out to you in partnership to support you, another program that also works with kids that are diverse and different. And that was really kind of the question, and kind of pulling resources together.
Yeah.
With the ability, sometimes two heads are better than one.
Yeah, absolutely. And the sky's the limit for us. I mean, we've got now a great CFO, Jeff, who is our I call him my smart white guy. And, the sky's the limit what we are capable of. And at least helping other divisions, learn what we do in an incredible, safe environment in the water. Because it is dangerous. It is, extreme special ed. But if it's done right, I mean, half my guys are lifeguards on the North Shore of Hawaii, which is the most dangerous place in the world. So it's got to be done right. Otherwise, someone's going to get hurt, or someone's going to drown. And there's a lot of other groups that are copying what we do for sometimes the wrong reason, and I don't like that. I see that pop up, and people are, I think, aware of who we are, and we've started this for a very simple reason. I have a child, and I've got a crew that I always promise to deliver the greatest guys in the water. So we will continue to expand, and who knows what the future will bring. Thank you for your question. You're amazing. Oh,
What
yes,
time?
please.
So understandably, the focus quite a bit on the kids. I'm just wondering if you could focus for a moment and describe some characteristics of the people who volunteer to help you in the endeavor.
I think the characteristics of the people volunteering are, I think they're very altruistic people. They're doing it because they're honored to be involved with these children. They're incredibly, talented in the water, so that part, is a must. But, these guys all, want to be here, and they're amazing in the water. And, it's a group that can handle, a very difficult situation. So, I'm very fortunate that I've traveled and I've been a pro surfer, but I've met some amazing surfers that want to be a part of this. And it takes a great person, not only talented in the water and have that ocean experience and knowledge, but inside too, to not, be freaked out by, a different child. So,
I can speak to that a little bit because I've watched all these guys for a couple of summers now, and the currency, what they get back from these kids that they're surfing with and the families is priceless. So they stop whatever they're doing in the rest of their lives, they fly halfway across the country, and they come and surf with these kids, and these kids light up at the experience, and these guys walk away from the beach. What you guys do is amazing, but I see that what you take away from that is also amazing. So I think that speaks to your question a little bit. What they get back is enormous, and they don't even think about what they're putting out. It's what they get back. They're greedy, selfish bastards.
Yes, sir. My son is an autistic adult, so yeah, we do have adults that do come that are over 18, and we try to just give them a regular surf lesson and not that tandem ride that is kind of like what we're kind of famous for. So it doesn't. But like I said, we do have like a requirement that we can't lift up a child that's any greater than a weight that would kind of break your back, especially so many of them. But even the most profoundly autistic child are capable of riding a board, safely and stand up in the right conditions and right waves, like a typical surfer, which is still amazing to me. And you had one question? What time tomorrow? Oh, we're going to be at Lido from 9 o'clock to 3. 9 o'clock to 3. Dan?
Is that about do
I
it
think
for
you're
us?
losing
I
me.
think that, yeah.
I can tell when I'm
losing Izzy.
losing myself.
So-
Buy a copy of his book, support his
Dolphin Bookshop's over
organization.
here.
Come out to the beach and check out what they do, and just support them by being there. It's a great organization. He's a great guy. Thank you, Izzy, so much for coming to Port Washington.
Yeah, thank you all.
And thank you all for coming out.
Thank you, guys.